Eighth round at the Tata Steel Masters, and we joined the game between Fabiano Caruana and Vincent Keymer. Vincent, with the white pieces, played the Queen's Gambit, and here we have reached this position where the material is even. Both sides have 4 pawns each, but white is attacking this pawn on b4, which can be picked up. However, one thing that is greatly in black's favor is the bishop pair, and also the slightly weakened diagonal here towards the white king. It could come under big pressure. So Vincent, although can win a pawn, has to be very careful about how he builds this position up. He takes the pawn on b4, and Fabi very quickly attacks the rook on f1. Now this is a very tough moment, and Vincent, having just 50 seconds, cannot calculate all the intricacies. The best move is rook f2. Instead, he plays rook f4, which turns out to be a big mistake, because now Fabi has the move rook e7, and somehow the rook on e1, if it takes, the c1 bishop is hanging. Now imagine if you had played rook f2, then after rook e7, you can go rook d1, bishop e2, rook d2, very tough move. And after takes, king g2, both the bishops are hanging, and this would be an equal position. But after rook f4, now the same trick does not work, because the e2 bishop will not be hanging. So rook e7, rook d1, bishop e2, rook d2, and now just simply rook c1 check, king g2 and king g7, and black is completely winning. So with these lines, Fabi does find rook e7. Beautiful move that just goes to show why he's an absolute calculation monster here. He plays bishop d2, takes, rook, bishop takes, and now you can swoop in with your rook here, but then the bishop is hanging, and so it does make sense to start off by moving this bishop here and attacking the rook on f4. Fabi quietly takes his time, and it's really great that he's doing so in this position, because even though he has just a minute on the clock, if he finds the best move, he will win this game. And he finds it. Bishop e5 is on the board, and look at how this bishop takes away the crucial square. Keymer decides to play bishop c3 because he realizes that if he would save the rook here, rook c1 would drop the entire bishop. So that's the reason why he plays bishop c3. But now Caruana takes the rook, pawn takes f4, and white is an exchange down here. How easy or difficult it is to convert this position remains to be seen, but Caruana brings his king up. And his point is, if you play knight takes pawn, I have bishop c6 pinning here. And you can see that Fabi gets up. It's move 40. Both players get 50 minutes extra on the clock. He goes knight c2. He would like to play knight to d4. For example, king e6 would be a huge mistake because of knight d4 check, and you lose the bishop. But Caruana, you can expect him not to fall for such tricks. Bishop c4. Attacking the pawn on a2 here, and Vincent just plays his pawn to a3, and now rook comes in to e8. So the rook is threatening to enter down on the e2 square. Goes knight to d4, and now rook e4. The pawn is hanging here on f4. And Vincent pushes his pawn to f5. This doesn't seem something too easy to hold now. Fabi takes it, g takes f4. Every pawn trade is actually in white's favor, because the more pawns that are traded, the better it is. King g2 played. The point is, knight takes f5 was playable, but maybe Vincent didn't like the fact that rook f4, knight here, and somehow his king would be kind of trapped in. So he decides to first bring his king out, And now Fabi plays rook f4, defending the pawn, saying that I'm a pawn up. Vincent decides to start pushing his queenside pawns. A4 is on the board. He would like to play b4, b5, b6, a5 and start pushing on the queenside. But the king goes to e8. And black is actually moving in with the king to stop the queenside pawns, it seems. a5. King comes to d7. And now pawn to h3. It's always nice to observe how a player of Caruana's stature is able to find these little moves that win the game. The rook f1, knight comes back to f3. And now the bishop drops back. He pushes his pawn to h4. And pawn comes up to h5. And he goes pawn to b4 here. Vincent getting his queenside pawns rolling, but at the same time the bishop on c3 is now loose. So Fabi can actually go and start hassling this bishop. He pushes his pawn to f4, just taking away few of the squares from the white king. Knight comes to d4, preparing the move b5. And now the bishop settles in on the c4 square. If you were to play b5 here, then rook c1 and the bishop is losing out. You go here, I go rook b1 and it should be winning. Plays bishop b2, bishop c4, rook b1, bishop c3 again. And Vincent goes rook to d1. Knight comes to f3. And Caruana now sacks the pawn d4. Because if you take here, bishop d5 is a deadly pin. And if you take here with the knight, he goes back. But if you take here with the knight, then rook d3 and you're losing the piece as after bishop here. Bishop d5, king f2 and rook a3. The bishop has run out of squares. So he goes bishop d5 next, plays his king to f2. And pawn pushes forward to d3. The bishop comes up to stop the pawn from moving forward. Takes, rook takes, king takes, and now you want to queen, but there is king e2. So not so simple. He does play d2. King comes back. And what is Fabi's idea here? He pushes f3 check, sacrificing the rook. Beautiful. Because if king takes d1, there is f2. And there's no way to stop the queen. It's like queen here and then queen the other pawn. So a fine win for Fabiano Caruana.